So please welcome Paul and Mark. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Chris. Good afternoon, everyone. It's a great pleasure to be here. In name of BRASSCOM board members, I would like to thank Forrester once more for coming before you. I would like to recognize Softex, also an association that's focused in software excellence and innovation, as well as Chris kindly introduced Mark, who is a vice president. Talk to us a little bit about Stefanini, a great story of success in the internationalization of Brazilian companies, as well as some client cases. A little bit about me. I'm with the BRASSCOM, focused on the market development efforts, as Chris mentioned. I basically have 20 years of experience previously with Ernst & Young and Capgemini. And the reason why I mentioned that my focus was in the global delivery, identifying regions that could be provide great assets and talents for the global delivery requirements of clients, in the same way then developing those centers of excellence in the different markets. So I joined BRASSCOM exactly with the focus in not only collaborating with the companies in introducing the Brazilian market, but also in expanding the international presence of some of our associate members. This slide gives a little bit of perspective in terms of the main members. Find not only the global international companies, but also successful companies such as Stefanini, that we're going to hear more in details, that have been not only successful in the domestic market, but also internationally. A little bit about BRASSCOM. Some of our primary focus are, one, with the regulations and definitions and creation of new laws that can facilitate the growth of the IT market in Brazil and also the international relationships. The other being education, a strong focus in making sure that Brazil has the right set of skills to support the kind of challenges that we have in the future. Then the infrastructure and digital projects, basically identifying, understanding the gaps, and having specific projects to address those infrastructure requirements in the country. And then finally, the market development efforts, not only in Brazil, but also with the international focus. I'd like to pause for a moment and talk about some of what we discussed in Washington with Forrester in the beginning of May. As we met many of the CIOs, in our discussions, we're geared towards how architecting tomorrow business outcomes. And in those dialogues, we understand the future, the kind of users you're going to have in the future. Bring my own device, for instance, as well as the kind of expectations, as George mentioned in the beginning of the dialogue today, as well as the digital disruption, and then the requirements within the mobile devices and the ability to engage mobile, in terms of being mobile and still being engaged with the organization or network. So as we were having those discussions, we quickly engage on the dialogue, okay, so how to source tomorrow business outcomes. And as we're having those dialogues, three key directives came naturally in the discussion. As you identify the partners and who we're going to collaborate in solving business problems, you want to make sure that those partners are associated with ecosystems that have the strong fundamentals in the same way that you have the right mentality, being agile, flexible, and problem solver driven. The second one, you want to have relationships with partners that are going to bring new ideas and insights throughout the entire life cycle of your relationship. And then and then very importantly, having the proper level of partnerships. So partnerships with not only with the trust credible providers, but in the same way, the ones that are going to be engaged, again, through the entire life cycle and be sensitive to our business needs and have the ability to respond to those requirements. If you talk a little bit about the way how IT, and you have experience on an ongoing basis, the way how IT bring productivity improvements in your organizations or your clients, that is also a study that was conducted in Brazil in terms of the impact that ICT brings to specific sectors, for instance, in the development countries such as in the US, where it is significant and it's clear the productivity level achieved by sectors that leverage ICT compared to the ones that don't. Now, when you take in consideration the kind of improvements in terms of competitiveness for the BRIC countries compared to the level of readiness of network and access to ICT, you see the trend. The more readily available technology is for society in general, for the economy, you should expect the increase in productivity. And the reason why that's relevant, Brazil currently is the fourth largest ITC market in the world. Specifically in Latin America, Brazil currently is the largest market and corresponds to close to 50% of the market for the entire region. So that positions Brazil in a very strategic and interesting, with a very strategic and interesting opportunity to collaborate in the global scenario. So with that in mind, Brazil is engaged in design and implement a strategic plan for this vision, Brazil ICT 20. And that vision is one where Brazil is positioning itself to become a leader within the BRIC countries, as well as a reference in the way how to leverage ICT to assist the economic, social, and government requirements. In despite of any infrastructure challenges that you may have, that's the vision. In the same way, then leveraging ICT in the strategic fashion, not only in terms of innovation, bring innovation to strategic sectors, but also by having a very robust and competitive ICT industry that can collaborate with different segments of the industry. Now, as you're having the global, as you understand the global context and the dialogues, how to leverage talents from different regions globally, we understand the kind of dynamics, not only in the creation of, the BRIC countries and the emerging markets, but also the kind of global markets that we understand from finance, education, healthcare, and others. And as we've been discussing, there are disruptive technologies coming to this mix. And Brazil sees a great opportunity to not only collaborate with the international companies coming from Brazil, but also with the companies internationally and in the global market. Now, if I may briefly ask you, how many of you here are from Europe? So I'd say 60%. How many of you are from the US? And how many of you are from other regions? So there we have. We have, I would say, 20% from other regions and most of participants here from Europe. So, one perspective that we usually like to bring to the dialogue, and I would ask, I'm a father of 2 soccer players and Brazilian, been in Chicago for 18 years now. I'm at 2 homes, but still. Reason why I bring that up, there are some interesting analogies, and one being, so for you that follow football, most likely you know who Pep Guardiola is, and a very successful Barcelona, now Bayern Munich, and in implementing a way how to play the game very effectively. The reason I bring that up is once Pep Guardiola was asked, okay, where do you bring your inspiration? And he referred to a Brazilian national team, one of the best in history from 1970. And the reason why I bring that up is when you look to that team, you'll find what we call a number 10. Pelé was a number 10. The very versatile, very agile, very flexible, very creative player. You'll find one of those number 10s in most of the positions. The reason I bring that up is that's the way how we gotta too often understand the contribution that you get from a Brazilian company or from Brazilian professionals from Brazil. You have a profession that's very agile, that's very committed and aligned culturally speaking with this kind of very diverse picture that you see here, in the same way very committed to results. So there is a discipline. The analogy with the football is basically you have the discipline, you know that you must be organized and be efficient, but that doesn't prevent you from bringing innovation, insights, and ideas as you solve the day-to-day problems. Now, if you take into consideration, Brazil is the only BRIC country within the Western Hemisphere. So you realize that that brings the opportunity for collaborating in the real time and sharing value on an ongoing basis. That added to the culture that you find, and if I may ask, how many of you consider that the soft skills are too often very significant for the success of your engagement? From idea to implementation. How many of you consider that being as a key aspect? So, yes, as expected. So, we understand that that is key. We must understand each other as we start our engagement. We must understand the issues and challenges. And that's the one opportunity that we have in Brazil. For instance, Stefanini and Mark's going to touch on that. is an example of a company that came through the overall recession. The banking industry in Brazil, there was a time when it had 100% of inflation per month. Still though, you had a very robust banking industry that was able to create very flexible, agile solutions, and that served as a great catalyst for creating that mindset within the industry. And that's one thing that you should expect. Another example, a company that's also one of our members, Johnson & Johnson, is an interesting client where with CIT being the company and they created a solution in Brazil, now that became a best practice implemented in all the other regions. McDonald's is another example. So the very important considerations here, besides the risk mitigation focus that you must have in identifying other locations, so the offshore plus one strategy, there is also an opportunity for bringing talents that will collaborate through the entire life cycle of the engagements. Very important, bringing new ideas, bringing experience for solutions that were implemented in the Brazilian market, for instance. So if you go through the different areas in the market, you find ideas, you find innovation and technologies. For instance, Brazil currently has 2.5 million IT professionals with a demand for additional 900,000 within the next 10 years. As I referred, Brazil has a very robust finance and banking industry, currently processing 66 billion transactions, able to conclude a transaction in the same day. If you go to some other markets, even advanced markets, you're not going to find that. As well as welcoming close to $10 billion of investment on a yearly basis. Understanding that the opportunities that we have in the market now have a lot to do with the big data, social, and the cloud computing. So significant opportunities for collaboration, not in the market, but leverage those experiences elsewhere. Examples that we have in the Brazilian government that leverage technology, for instance, to conclude the 140 million votes within the 3 hours and having the election concluded, in that timeline. So there are very interesting examples. If you go to energy, Brazil is the greenest, provides the greenest energy matrix in the world. Sugar-based ethanol being an example. Not only serving Brazil, but also for the ones that don't know, is the fuel that's used for the Indy race car in the category in the U.S. Even though there is the corn-based ethanol, the Brazilian sugar ethanol is used there. So there are significant opportunities and progress in each one of these segments, not only to collaborate with the market, but also leveraging the best practices. I have to touch briefly in terms of other programs at BRASSCOM, and it's very interesting, is collaborating directly. One being the Brazil Without Borders, where graduates are being sent to the most advanced schools to get that master and PhD. So thousands of Brazilians being invited to join those education centers, universities, and so forth. In the same way, then we have Brasil Maior. Brasil Maior was created as a way to allow the country to get stronger after the recession. And we have within the Brazil IT Maior, currently Brazil has the second largest Java community in the world, and just for a curiosity, it's the second largest user of Facebook. So there are significant programs in place, and you have the World Cup and the Olympics, great catalyst, not only for those events, but also the opportunity for closing some gaps and implementing some great advancements within the broadband availability. And some specific laws that BRASSCOM has collaborated with the Brazilian government to reduce Social Security collection, and that has been very important for the Brazilian firms. Now, as I rush through, I would like to show you a video, and as we do, just to highlight, Brazil within the next 10 years is very well positioned, not only to focus the domestic market and growth, but also the projection from the current exports from $3 billion to $20 billion within the next 10 years. If you could, Mark, show the video, please. Thank you very much, Mark. So, as you had a little bit more exposure to the Brazilian taste, now I would like to welcome Mark, please, to join us. Thank you very much, Mark.